Welcome, everybody, to another Kicking Tables. My name is Sean.
And I'm Tico.
And today we are honored to welcome art director and co-designer on Escape the Night, the board game, Mr. Adam Lawson. Adam, welcome to Kicking Tables.
It is good to be here, gentlemen. Very good.
So, Adam, you have been involved with Escape the Night, obviously, which has been a YouTube series for 4 seasons now, and now it is becoming a board game. You're turning this immensely popular show into a board game. Now, what prompted you to want to make this a board game?
Well, I think what happened with it was we had, Joey and I have a deep love of board gaming. We do it together often, and I produced and directed Tabletop for 4 years, and it's just a deep passion of mine. And Joey and I always, throughout making the seasons of the show, because I write and direct and show run the series as well, we'd always talk about what would the board game of this be like? What would the escape room be like? And we did build an escape room for it, and then we decided it's time to build the board game. And I think that we loved it so much because in a way, Escape the Night, the TV show, is like living in a board game. And so we thought, well, it wouldn't it be great if you could have that game at home.
So how does the game actually work? How do you actually play the game then?
So the way it works out is, so it's a cooperative game, but it has a voting mechanic where at the end of each of the 10 rounds of play, it pits 2 players against each other, and one of them is killed off, like in the show itself. So the way it works out is you are at this haunted estate back in 1920s, and you have until sunrise to get out before you're all killed or consumed by the evil of the house and become a part of its machinations. So what you do is, on your turn, you essentially take 1 action per character, and a player can play multiple characters because there's 11 characters in the story, and you always play it with all 11. But I may have 4, you may have 3, somebody else may have 4.
Okay.
That I'm controlling, kind of like maybe you do in Zombicide. And so on my turn, on my character's turn, I roll 2 dice, and that number is how many spaces I move. And the idea of it is I'm trying to land on these society against evil tiles that are inside of the room, inside of the rooms of the house. And once I've cleared out all those titles, I can claim an artifact. And once I've claimed all 9 artifacts and returned to the center of the foyer, I win the game, right, with all the living characters. And but each one of those tiles, and you land on it, you turn it over, and you either have to solve a diabolical clue or face a terrifying monster. So as soon as you land on that tile, you flip it over, and you deal with whether the clue or the monster problem. And in this case, with clues, you roll 2 dice to try and solve it, and it has a difficulty number. If you meet the difficulty number, exceed, solve the clue, you get a relic card, which is like a bonus that a player could use with any of their characters to help them out. And that's the end of that character's turn. You rotate them to the side, and the next character goes. If I land on a monster card, it's slightly different. Monsters are harder, and I take that monster card and I place it on top of my character. And I roll the dice, and if I don't defeat it, that monster stays on top of my character, and it can't move until I defeat it. So every turn that he comes up, I have to keep trying to defeat this monster.
Okay.
And both clues and monsters some of them have special benefits or disadvantages based on whether you solve it or fail to solve it. And so part of the cooperative strategy is, moving the characters around the house, trying to get to the tiles so that you can solve these clues or defeat these monsters. And then each of the 11 characters have a power or a special benefit, right? The professor gets a +1 when trying to solve clues. The big game hunter gets a +1 when fighting monsters. The savant, which is the character that Joey plays in the show, has a special relationship with the house, so it can automatically defeat the evil of the house. That's the hardest monster in the game. Or like the fixer, she can swap herself out with somebody else in the death challenge.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
So they all have different abilities, and then each of the monsters have, you know, some unique aspects to them, and each of the clues have some unique aspect. So we go around the table, right? Each character has an action, and once we've reached the end of that action, the vote is called. And then each character has a voting token, and we have this cool voting box with each of the characters' faces in different slots and a little shield so you can privately vote. And that's passed around the table, and you vote for people. And the two with the most amount of votes, tie is solved with rolling of the dice, are going into the death challenge. So then you draw a death challenge card, and you flip it over, and you read the unique challenge. It's fun because some of them might require like a dice roll-off. Some of them, if there are certain circumstances that occur, you both live and somebody outside of the challenge dies.
Wow, okay.
So there's lots of mechanics of what can happen once you get in the death challenge. So ultimately, a character is killed off. There are some exceptions to that, but usually a character is killed off. You know, you move the round tracker forward 1 hour. Everybody resets their cards, restores their cards, and move the starting player token to the left and do another round.
So if you're playing with a full house of 11 people and somebody's voted off, is that person actually out of the game for the rest of the turn?
That's correct. They're out. However, there are certain relic cards that can revive a dead guest, and there is a certain monster that if defeated, it revives a dead guest. And so people who get out can come back in, if you will.
So there sounds like there's a lot of elements you've translated from the show into the game, but the show itself is actually a very visceral experience with physical puzzles and locks and keys and finding clues and putting those clues together into like a combination or something. Is there some kind of a translation of that kind of visceral experience into the board game? Like actual puzzle solving?
There is not physical puzzle solving. We had gone the rounds a lot on that in the initial design, right? Joey and I were going through it. And part of physical puzzles also brought cost of the game up significantly once you start to have bigger pieces, mechanicals. And it started to reach a point where maybe it wasn't as accessible of a game. And then the second thing of it was it also dramatically expanded the play time of the game. And so as we kind of were debating that, we felt like the best call was to, you know, incorporate that visceral element sort of in the flavor text and some of the unique benefits and hindrances that come of the cards. For example, one of the cool things is in the show, there's the mysterious man. It's this evil person who's also seeking the artifacts and is kind of working against you. So each time you clear all the tiles in a room and claim an artifact, you have to roll the dice and see what consequence comes from the mysterious man.
Oh, wow.
He may steal relics from people. He may cause somebody to go back to the start of the board. And so we tried to build that sort of visceral reaction and like sort of the flavor of what was happening on the cards, and by adding this, you know, bringing in the mysterious man to it, but still also keeping the game in a range where, you know, it could be a $40 game. And so I think that was our solve, I guess, to bringing that.
Will fans of the show see, you know, content from the show sort of make its way into the game? You know, puzzles or cards or characters. Obviously, characters. We've seen, you know, all of the characters are based up, but like other puzzles and pieces of the house.
Yeah. So the thing about it is, so that the house is laid out exactly as the set was laid out, with some minor alterations due to just the laying it out on a board, right? But all of the rooms that they experienced in the house, the lounge, the library, the secret room, the pool, the back shed, all the same that were in the show. The car out front is the same. And also all of the clues are actual clues that were solved in the show. And in fact, I even went back to some of the flavor text, and like some of the flavor text on the card is the exact words said in the show about that thing. And some of the mechanics of some of them were what happened in the show. And then, for example, there's a death challenge where two characters get into it, and they have this night with this challenge involves these perverse mannequins. And at the end of it, the two people in this challenge both live, and somebody outside of it died in the show. So then we recreate that moment where in that death challenge, what happens if you is then what happens is then you shuffle all the cards of people outside of the death challenge, flip over the top one, and that person dies instead. So we've tried to really translate those. We've added a few monsters and a few clues that were not in the show, but were going to be in the show.
Okay.
Because very early on, the show was 13 episodes. And so there's more monsters and things in those. And then as budgets and things are coming, it ended up at 10 episodes for season 1. So you kind of see some of the clues and monsters that never made the cut. You get to see in the game.
That's cool. So fans will definitely see a lot of stuff they're familiar with and be kind of like at home with this game. Now,
That's right.
We did talk about the player count, 1 through 11 players, which is fantastic. You don't see too many games with 1 to that many. But how does the gameplay differ for, say, 2 players or even 1 player? How does a 1-player person play this game? Especially, I'm curious about like the voting time. You have 1 or maybe two people playing. What kind of decisions do people need to think about when voting for characters?
Yeah, so when there is a 1 player, they have a special rule. There's a solo play rules in the back of the book, and essentially their function is they don't do the vote. They essentially take all of the cards of the current living characters, shuffle them face down, and draw 2. And that's who goes into the challenge.
That makes sense.
Okay. So that we just unfortunately just can't keep that mechanic. But by the virtue of the co-op nature and a lot of the fans, when we were talking about the game early on, the idea of being able to play it alone was exciting. So I think by solving that 1 mechanic, and it's still random, you still get all the fun of it. And then with 2 players, see, the thing about it is you get voting tokens, right? But you can't vote all for the same character. You have to split them up between at least 2. And also, too, sometimes, you may talk at the table, right, and say, hey, I think we should vote for the big game hunter or the hustler or the gambler because they're in a bad place, right?
Okay.
But, because they haven't done much in the game, maybe they're not in a good place, but the journalist, she's right next to the artifact. We don't want to lose her. So there's kind of some debate that can go on, and sometimes you can make your voting more strategic, or sometimes you can make it more the flavor of the people playing. So I think, if you're 2 serious gamers, you might make it more a strategy on the vote. But there are also certain clue cards that can affect the vote in the sense that if you solve a certain clue, that character is immune to being voted in.
Okay.
Or if you can have an additional vote. And so there's things that can disrupt that. And I think, hopefully part of the fun is, I think with any game, there's kind of a sweet spot of players, right?
Sure.
And I think that, once you kind of cross into 3 or 4, it starts to hit the sweet spot. But it really still, Joe and I played it many times as a 2-player. It's still really fun, especially because if I feel like my characters are in a good place and he feels like the same, I'm trying to vote for his. And then sometimes I'll try to, when placing in the tokens, try to convince him I'm voting for somebody else that I actually am.
Okay.
Like I'll say, oh, no, I totally agree with you. You're right. I'm putting in all my tokens for this person. And then bluff at the table and then do it wrong in the vote. And I think that's also part of the fun, right? And then he's
just
then
like
he's
real life.
Yes. So there is like a bluffing element that can come into the voting as well too, and we've experienced I think a lot of fun with that mechanic.
But is it an all win or all lose game?
Yes. So it's a co-op game in the sense that we've been talking about pandemic and before it started that it's an all win all lose. So the win condition is that all 9 artifacts need to be recovered, and then all of the living characters still on the board need to return to the ritual circle in the foyer.
Right.
That's at we're at the start of the board, and which is how they defeated the evil in the show. And what's unique about it is that for the last round of play, there's 10 hours essentially before sunrise, and there's 10 episodes of the show, and the last round of play is handled very different. Just like the last episode of the TV show was handled different. The last episode of the show had no voting, and it was a free-for-all, and we filmed it without any breaks at all, not even to reposition cameras. It was a full-on run across the house in the rain, all real time.
Wow.
And And so we tried to emulate that in the game. So on the last round of play, instead of everybody taking a turn and then going to the vote and death challenge, everybody takes a turn and then keeps going around in a circle while an hourglass goes. So I'm gonna roll. I've got to roll the dice, move my character, land on a tile, solve it all real time. You can't go yet, but then as soon as I'm done, you can go, and we can keep going around and around the circle.
No time to think, just do it.
No time to think.
Sudden death.
90 seconds to do it. Yeah, it's a sudden death. So you're going just like that last episode was. So it's like right as we're building the tension up, usually around 8th or 9th round, you're like, I don't know if we're gonna do this. I don't think we're gonna get there. Boom, the last round is this mad dash for the artifacts. So everybody's racing around, screaming at the next person to roll faster, trying to get into the foyer in the center with all the artifacts. And I think of the dozens of times we've played it, that 10th round almost has always come into play. I think just by virtue of the difficulty of the game, that you need that last round to gather the last few of the artifacts.
In your play testing, do you have some stats on how often you actually win the game?
Yes. So the thing about I'm glad you brought this up. So the thing about it is people most of the time win about 1/3 of the time.
Wow, that is a difficult game.
1/3 of the time, and depending on there's a few factors on it, but it's like 1/3 to 1/2 of the time. Like it kind of sits right in between there, which I think we wanted that feeling. Because I feel like a co-op game, if you play it and win the first time you play it, you almost you're maybe not as excited about it to play it again, right? It's when you're like, oh wait, if only we'd have done that one thing, and now I see it differently. Let's try it again. Was the hope was to create that feeling. I think like, Pandemic or Forbidden Island or Forbidden Desert, Matt Leacock's such a great game maker. I've lost to those games many times.
Oh yes.
And I think you guys might have as well.
Oh yeah.
And when you lose to them without losing too often, it invigorates you to play again.
Yeah.
And so right now it feels really satisfying. Obviously with anything there's, with a game that's happening on Kickstarter, there's power tweaks coming in and stretch goals happening and things, a little finesse work happening just to get it even better. And it's fun also to hear comments from people reading the rules, and they're bringing up thoughts and ideas that we hadn't thought of exactly. And so it's a really in an exciting place. So
what is the replayability? Like say we do play, third playthrough and we succeed. Is it going to feel new every time we come back to it, or are we going to sort of have solved most of the stuff after the first couple of times?
Well, I feel like that it has a pretty lengthy replayability to it. Yeah. One is there's 50 clue cards and there's 30 monster cards, but in the course of the gameplay, you're only going to ever fight 10 monsters and deal with 15 clues. So it's very likely to play a game and not experience even half of either of those decks. So there's a lot of cards you won't have seen. There's also an advanced mode that where you can rearrange the tiles on the board, so it's harder, it's more challenging. And also too, there is some special power cards that give you companions. Without spoiling too much of what's going to happen, there's some cards that become a companion. You defeat a monster and then they become a companion, and they do certain things for you. And as a result, the ride is quite different every time, with also it feeling like you have to relearn the rules, kind of like the joy of Magic the Gathering, right? It's different all the time, but you don't have to relearn the rules. So I feel like there is a good, 8 to 10 plays of that game, which, how many board games have you honestly played 8 to 10 times, with your group? I think there's probably good 8 to 10 plays out of that game where you're like, boy, that's been super fun. Boy, that's been fun.
Do you have hopes in the future to maybe release new clue cards to increase that replayability, like add stuff? Because obviously the clue cards are, once you know the answer to a clue, you're going to know it forever. So do you Or do you? Like, I don't know the nature of the clue cards.
Oh yeah. Let me explain that real quick, because that's an easy thing. So the clues and the monsters are not a clue you can learn. You have to solve it with dice rolling.
Oh, I see.
Okay.
Yeah. So you read the flavor text, and it sort of sets up the nature of the clue. Can you solve the demonic Schiffer robe? Right? Can you figure out? Can you find the music box to summon the Carnival of the Cursed? And then you roll the dice to accomplish it.
Okay.
Versus like actually obtaining an answer. Once again, it was a matter of the time it would take to then obtain answers, guess answers.
Sure. Okay.
And it making the gameplay too long. So
it's more of like it's more of a skill check than actually solving a clue.
Bingo, right?
Okay.
The solving of it is in the flavor, but not in the actual mechanic. And then there's very much that hope is that we would continue. We've done 4 seasons of the show, and this game is, imagine this is season 1 of the show. It'd be cool to do other seasons of the show. It would be amazing to do an expansion to this game as well. There's rooms in the house that couldn't fit on the board, such as the basement and other parts of the grounds. There's the Carnival of the Cursed and these hallucinations that they go into in episode 9 that aren't on the board just due to 20 by 20 restrictions.
Yeah.
And so it would be really exciting to see an expansion where you could add pieces to the board, where you could get 20 new clue cards. And so I would say yes to that.
So you actually brought up something that leads right into my next question was the characters in this seem to be most of the characters from season 1. Not all of them, but it seems to be like the actual characters are from season 1. Was that on purpose? Or what was the decision behind which characters do you include? Because each season are different. They're different personalities, but they're also different characters. So how did you decide which characters to put into this game to begin with?
Gotcha, yeah. So Escape the Night, the board game, as it stands right now, encapsulates just season 1.
Okay.
Right? So it's 1920s murder mystery setting for Escape the Night season 1. So season 2 of Escape the Night was in the Victorian era, and it was vampires and fantasy and a sorceress, and it was a very different. And then season 3 was a carnival, and season 4 was a museum, all with a different cast. And so, so imagine this is Escape the Night, the board game, season 1.
That makes sense,
right? So it's all of those characters, and obviously we couldn't use the exact likeness and names of the actors who portrayed them. Or the YouTubers who portrayed them, but it's the archetypes that they were embodying: the savant, the renegade, the big game hunter, the gambler, etc.
Yeah, some of the characters kind of look like their counterpart. I think the journalist,
the
journalist still kind of looks like Ava.
Yeah, the art's pretty close on a few of them.
Yeah, I mean it's good. It's good. She played a good character. So retail plans. Once this is done, Kickstarter, everybody has it in their hands. Will we see this in the retail stores?
You will.
Oh, fantastic.
So you will see it in Target. It's exciting. I'm hoping it expands beyond that, but that is an announcement we were able to make, that we did cross the line into the retail world with it, which is a tricky thing. Once again, also I was trying to hit that price point, of the game, that it's magical but affordable.
Right.
And so that it could live in retail and not only just fans of the show, but anybody who's interested in board gaming can enjoy.
And what about those fans across the border in Canada?
Yeah, we lost our targets.
Yes, well, across the border. Well, I don't know that full answer just yet.
That's
across. I know in the U.S. I wish I could say all the others. I think it will. Studio 71 is our publisher on the game, and they've been great about pushing that as far as we can. And so I think where we land at the end of Kickstarter, they're going to open more doors.
Fantastic. So if you're in Canada and you want this game now, you have to back it on Kickstarter. That will guarantee you a copy of it.
Yeah.
In
and
Canada.
the catch of it also too is just during this Kickstarter window is there the premium version of the game available. As I think what we wanted to provide was, why back this now? Why not wait till it's in Target, right?
Right. Okay.
You're right, because I think it's a common question. If it's got that much of a life in it, is that the premium version of the game gets all the stretch goals, has a totally different look to the box. It has, it has artifacts, that are plastic, and it has gold foil cards. It has an hourglass that's made out of wood. It has a board that has a beautiful treatment to it, and it has a gold foil box instead of the black box. And so there's a lot of fun, cool things about getting the premium version. The game is still the same. It's still the same fun at that level. But I think you might be like myself, that I like the spectacle of it.
Oh yes,
the
prettiness. Yeah.
Oh yes.
Yes, and so there's a chance to get that premium game, which is as we both know, unfortunately, premium games don't quite work in broad retail. Maybe in the hobby sector, but not in broad retail. So, but yeah, so that's the fun of it. Of getting it now is you get this version that won't exist later.
It's definitely a reason to kickstart it now. I think we have one more question before we let you go. Do you have plans? I think we asked earlier about expanding, like on clue cards, but do you have plans or ideas for expanding the game later on?
Like, might we see a full season 2 box?
What you just said right there is that is Joey and I's hope, and is that we would have, this is the season 1 version of Escape the Night, and there would be a season 2, and not only would it be cosmetically different, because the era, the characters, the monsters, everything was so different, but maybe there could be a new mechanic.
New mechanics. That'd be fantastic.
That's introduced that is specific to that season. That I think would be our real hope. And so fingers crossed this continues to be a success, so we can do.
Well, so far your Kickstarter has been a super success, almost 1,400% funded. So congratulations on that. Before we let you go, Adam, is there anything about the game you want our viewers to know that we haven't already talked about? What makes you really excited about this, Adam?
Yeah. So I guess here's what I would say that's super fun about this. I think what I would say about this game, that when I was making it with Joey and putting it together, at the core of it, I wanted to build a game that a gamer felt challenged playing, and a non-gamer, it felt accessible to them. Okay. I think always as when I was directing and producing Williams Tabletop, that was always our question: is this game in one camp or the other camp, or can it be in both camps?
Right.
And I think we built something that can be in both camps. There is enough intricacy and flavor that occurs, but mechanics that are simple enough to learn. So that's what I would say. It works for both sides of the camps. So it's good for friends, it's good for families, and I genuinely love it myself.
That's excellent. Adam, thank you so much for spending some time with us here on Kicking Tables. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. Escape the Night is available now on Kickstarter, and I believe it ends August 14th, so there's still time to get in on it. It looks fantastic, and especially if you want the premium version, you need to get in on the Kickstarter, because that will not be available afterwards. Again, Adam, thank you so much for spending time with us. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, guys.
You and your friends have been invited to play a game that takes you back in time to a house of evil. The journey will not be easy. There are many ways to lose, and only one way to win. Do you have what it takes to escape the night?